Train the muscles, not the joints.
Welcome back to Natural Glam Bodybuilding, and today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about spirituality and bodybuilding. And I just had somebody ask me a question about bodybuilding, and they say it's a narcissistic path, and how can it blend with spirituality, and how can, you know, this whole thing where people check themselves out in the mirror and spirituality, how can it be linked? Like, how can there be a place of non-ego, I guess you could say, and bodybuilding at the same time? Like, are they contradictory, or is there a possibility of this happening? So the first thing I'm going to say is that just because somebody is spiritual or on the spiritual journey does not mean that they aren't victimized by the laws of life, right? I mean, you still need to eat, you still need to breathe, you still need to support yourself in some way, and you also still need to take care of the body. So just because you're taking care of the body doesn't mean that you're less spiritual. If anything, it's actually a movement of compassion. Now, where people get trapped is that they set goals for themselves that are based on ego because they're looking for approval from others as well as themselves, or himself or herself. I always say themselves, it's just easier than doing both all the time. But the bottom line is that when you are setting goals and you're doing it because you are suffering and you feel that achieving that goal is going to alleviate that suffering, at that point, that goal becomes a journey of ego because it's based on suffering. It's based on something that you need, right? But once you realize your own fulfillment, then goals become a movement of play. You see, so the motive is different, right? And a lot of spirituality has to do with motivation. Where is your motivation coming from? And if we go very deep into this, we start to realize that there's such thing as identification, and that identification is recognized inside you every day when you say I, right? If we follow up I, it really is an idea. You're like, I have an idea of myself, and that's what you mean when you say I. Most people mean this. Unless they're enlightened, they mean my idea of myself when they say I. Now, if that I can transform into no idea of yourself and into just this, at that point, anything you do becomes a spiritual path, including the grand observation of your exercises, goals and no goals, right? Things you do just for playing, or just the movement of your heart, the movement of your compassion. At that point, it's not ego when you are doing something, because you're not doing it from a place of suffering. You're doing it from a place of just exploration and a sharing of yourself. I guess that's a better way of putting it. It's a sharing of something deep inside you. So at that point, when you train and you're noticing, hey, this exercise makes my muscles bigger, if the exercise just made your muscles bigger but made you feel like crap all the time, if you're coming from that true place, you'd say, geez, there has to be a more holistic way to play instead of just experiencing pain for the sake of pain itself. Perhaps there is a more true way to train, lift weights, and sculpt the physique like art, like you would with clay, but not become so identified with it that you ignore any pain or warning signals that come up. So that's why this channel, as much as it is the bodybuilding channel, and I do goofy humor here and everything, it really is ultimate spirituality in motion. That's really what I'm teaching here. As much as it seems like, you know, I'm doing all sorts of weird stuff and whatever, because humor is also part of the soul. It's part of you. It's part of what helps break up idealisms, right? Humor helps break up that mind structure that you may have going on, right? When sometimes you can see things from a new perspective, it's funny. And the reason why you feel it's funny, it's because you can experience what it's like to break up your own mind structure or point of view that you were so certain about just a few minutes earlier, right? So once you break up your mind structure, that's really spirituality. And that's really what happens when you are observing yourself neutrally in the gym and seeing what works and what doesn't work, but you're not identified or becoming a fanatic about one way or the other. When you're heavily immersed in the ego, though, you become a fanatic. You're like, oh, this should work, even though the evidence before you is showing you clearly that it is not working. You know, some aspect of your life is not working, but you are identified with it working a certain way, and therefore you will keep on doing something and it becomes destructive. So say ass to the grass squats are not right for you, but you believe that nobody will like you if you don't do ass to the grass squats, your peers will not approve of you, and somehow you are less of a human being or something like that. That would be heavy ego. That would be where bodybuilding or lifting weights becomes ego. Because if your knees are hurting when you do ass to the grass squats and your back is hurting and you continue to do it, then it's ego that's driving the show. Because who you are is truly wisdom incarnate. And there would be no reason for you just to self-destruct just for the sake of other people's approval. So where bodybuilding becomes ego is when you do it for the approval from others and you are doing it in order to fulfill a role, an idea of a role that you have in your mind. Now, at first, anything you do is all about roles. I mean, as a kid, you know, you grow up in a young adult and stuff, and you're trying to find your role in the world. But at some point, every person becomes aware of this role and the repercussions of playing a role. Some people could argue it takes lifetimes for some people to realize this, but you start to realize, wow, that role is actually a prison. So once you relinquish the role or the idea that I have to be this or have to be that, and then you play, and maybe one of your playgrounds is the gym, then you start to neutrally observe what's working and what's not working, and it's just a way of relating to the body. It's relationship. And that's very much in alignment with spirituality. Relationship. Some people call that love or compassion, whatever way you want to call it, but it's just establishing harmony through relationship with your environment. After all, you got to be here anyway, so you might as well have a relationship with it. And perhaps bodybuilding is singing to your soul or your physical constitution. But for some people, maybe it's not that. Maybe it's running, maybe it's yoga, maybe it's something else. And that's fine too. That's also part of relinquishing your ego. So bodybuilding is not necessarily narcissistic. Once you stop playing a role and you start creating art and the body is your canvas, then it is a totally different endeavor than some sort of fanatical, narcissistic sort of ego endeavor, right? So spirituality and bodybuilding can exist, and bodybuilding can just be one of the games you play to establish a deeper relationship with the physicality. Some people call that grounding. So don't worry, if you love bodybuilding, if your heart is there, just be aware of where you are identified with being something, or having a PR every day, otherwise you suffer, or having to be a certain size, otherwise you suffer. You know, this could be a very strong path for you to grow in awareness of why you are doing what you're doing and relinquishing any suffering around it, so that way you use it as an excuse to have a deeper relationship with your physical body, and the relationship becomes first and foremost not the outcome, not the goal. So this is the way you can turn the bodybuilding path to the spiritual path, right? And it always helps, of course, to have a meditation practice as well, because that'll keep you honest. but yeah, so yeah, bodybuilding is perfect for going along with spirituality if you are coming from the truest place within you. So yeah, that's how I can do the whole meditation thing and still lift weights and joke around about becoming pumpy and lumpy and saying mountain. So yeah, realize the mountain within you and then enjoy the relationship of life. And that's all I got to say about that. Thanks a lot for watching. If you need to get hold of me, just go to naturalglambodybuilding.com, and thanks to the Patreon supporters, and take care for now.